I don't know about you, but as I look at the chaos sweeping across the world today, I only have one question. Where the heck are all the men? In today's video, I want to discuss one of the primary responsibilities in being a man, and that is being a protector. Now, I'm not talking about mere males or what I like to call M&Ms. There's plenty of those out there. I'm talking about real men. I'm talking about macho men.
Yeah.
I'm talking about men who we could look up to as role models. Where are the fathers who are supposed to be active in their kids' lives? Where are the men that are supposed to teach the young bucks how to behave in public and act like they've been somewhere? Where are the mentors that actually care enough about you that will put you in your place when you're acting up and slap you when you're talking nonsense? What happened to passing on to the next generation the virtues of discipline, a solid work ethic, the warrior's ethos of self-sacrifice and honor that was traditionally associated with being a man? Well, here at Manacology, our goal is to equip all of those weak sauce M&Ms out there with the tools, knowledge, and wisdom on how to become an effective man who will leave a positive impact not just on their families, but on society at large. I'm your resident manicologist, Uncle V, and in today's video, I want us to look at the story of St. George and the dragon. Now, why do we want to talk about St. George? Well, one of the main roles of a man, like we said earlier, is to be a protector. You're to protect your family, your community, and your nation. And thus, we can learn how to be a protector from the examples around us, from what our fathers taught us, as well as the stories that have been told. Now, St. George is known as the great protector and patron saint of soldiers. And as we deep dive into this story, I want us to learn from his example on what it means to be a man of courage and strength, and how we can develop our own fortitude to rise up and vanquish the dragons that are currently wreaking havoc in our society. Make sure to watch to the end of this video, as I'm going to break down some of the dragons plaguing our society today and how we as men can come together united as one force to conquer our present day dragons. Now, as we journey through the story, I want us to focus on three major points. Number one, look at how the dragon is unopposed as it destroys society. Then look at how things start to change when somebody like St. George enters the picture. Number two, and probably the most important, look at what happened to all the men. Where are all the men? And why are all the men allowing these dragons to wreak havoc over their kingdoms in the first place without anyone ever trying to stand up to it? And number three, if a similar story was being told about you 100 years from now, would you be the hero in the story like St. George with a pair of brass gonads to stand up to the dragon? Or would you just be one of the timorous townspeople who just idly stood by and let the dragon do whatever it wanted to do? Now, enough with the overture. Let's get into our story.
In days long ago, when majestic castles once graced the enchanted landscape, there lived a heroic knight whose name was Sir George. He was such a brave, noble, and devout knight that people started calling him St. George. Whenever a kingdom was wrought with chaos and there were no heroes to be found, St. George would ride on his trusted steed and fight to restore order again to the land. Thieves and evildoers would flee in horror from his presence, knowing that they had no chance to best his sword. Once St. George would restore order to a realm, men would be able to once again focus on their work. Women would be able to enjoy the freedom they had lost, and children would once again play outside and even frolic through the woods, enjoying the innocence of their childhood without having to worry about any evil person trying to harm them. St. George one day went for a ride on his horse throughout the last kingdom he had saved and saw everything was again in order. He said to himself, "I have finished my purpose here. Order and prosperity have returned again to these lands. I must seek out a new adventure and liberate those who may be oppressed somewhere else. Perhaps there are faraway lands being held captive by a great evil. Perhaps their people live in fear. Perhaps their women may even be abused, and children may be too scared to leave their homes. Perhaps I may even find a dragon that is wrecking the lives of the local villagers." St. George then bid his farewells, put on his armor, fastened his sword to his belt, mounted his steed, and set off on his new adventure, not knowing which road may lead him to the next dragon he would have to face. As he left the castle grounds, a great procession of people came out to bid him farewell, and off he went on his next adventure. As he left the castle grounds, he rode away into the wilderness. On and on he went until he came to a land which he did not recognize. He saw plenty of fields filled with grain, but wondered, where were all the men? Why was no one harvesting these fields? He kept riding and riding until he came across a village that appeared deserted, and wondered again, where are the men? Where have they vanished to? As he rode past the deserted village, he saw crops that had been scorched, as if fire had rained down from heaven itself and consumed them in the smoldering heat. He had witnessed this scene before in other villages and instantly knew this must be the work of a horrible beast. He then realized that perhaps it might have been the same beast that drove people away from their village. As George kept riding past the scorched earth around him, he looked up towards the distant hills and saw an old castle glistening as the sun was setting. He thought to himself, now I can find answers to what kind of evil has befallen this place. As St. George approached the castle, he noticed people looking miserable. They were starving, they looked terrified. He was told that a great dragon had plagued the kingdom and was nesting in the marsh near the castle. At first, 2 sheep were being fed daily to appease the dragon's horrible hunger, but the people had run out of sheep. With no more sheep to feed this beast, the dragon now demanded that a beautiful maiden be sacrificed instead. The lot this day had fallen upon the princess to be sacrificed to the dragon. As St. George heard this disheartening story, he looked around and noticed children were afraid to go outside the castle walls. Women no longer sang joyful songs, and he wondered once again why there were no men who would stand up and fight against this dragon. If the men of the kingdom were to have stood together against the dragon, they surely would have prevailed, he thought. Alas, being the heroic knight that he was, St. George said to himself, if I am the only man willing to stand up against this beast, then so be it. I will meet this beast in battle, and if I fall, but I will not cower in the face of this great evil. As St. George watched the gloomy subjects, his gaze was suddenly captured by a beautiful princess coming out of the main tower. She was dressed in white with a scarlet cord tied around her waist. She started to weep in great sorrow as she passed through the main gate. St. George then approached the princess and asked her, "My lady, why do you weep?" She cries out, "Oh brave knight, leave this place at once. If the dragon sees you here, he will surely take your life. You are in grave danger." "Take my life," yells St. George. "Do you not know that I have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? I have prayed to the Lord for strength and direction, and he has sent me to free you of this oppression. One life will be taken, my lady, today, but it shall not be mine. Show me where this dragon dwells, and I will vanquish this great evil from the land." When the princess saw that St. George was valiant, unafraid, and ready for battle, she too began to take courage. The princess then led St. George to the lake where the dragon was resting. Once St. George arrived at the shores of the lake, that great dragon began to awake and rose up out of its watery domain. The dragon's teeth were like the size of daggers, but St. George was not frightened, as he was determined to put an end to the dragon's reign of terror. As the dragon leaped onto dry ground, St. George pulled out his sword and charged fiercely towards the dragon. They engaged in an epic battle. On many occasions, the dragon opened wide its mouth, trying to devour St. George. The clanging of steel against the impenetrable scales of the dragon could be heard as far away as the castle. The battle lasted for what seemed like hours. St. George slashed and lunged his sword at the dragon, but the scales of the wild beast were like iron shields protecting itself against the blade of evil's bane. St. George grew tired of the prolonged fight. The dragon, sensing imminent victory, and in its arrogance stretched out its wings and expanded its chest, allowing St. George for a brief moment to strike and sink his sword into the dragon's chest, piercing at his heart, and against all odds, St. George was able to slay the wild beast. As in times before, St. George had once again vanquished the great evil that was afflicting the land. St. George then took the scarlet thread around the waist of the princess, tied it to the dragon, and dragged it all the way back to the castle to show the people what great victory had been accomplished that day. This served as a notice to the townspeople what a single man with vision, courage, and resolve could do in restoring order to the land. He also took the head off the dragon as a reminder to what would happen to other dragons that would dare try to bring terror again to the kingdom. The princess was once again safe. The men took courage in when St. George had done, and they started returning to their homes. Women sang their songs again, and children could run around freely without fear of being terrorized or abused by the evil beast. Because of the willingness and courage of one man to stand up against the dragon, the kingdom was once again free of tyranny, following the victory and heroism of St. George.
In our story, we saw what happened to a land when the men did nothing to fight the oppressive dragon. When men don't stand up to these dragons, these beasts will destroy our societies. They'll start by taking away your sheep, which represent your livelihood. They'll seek to devour and take advantage of your women. They will even bring fear and confusion to your children and even groom them to believe dragons are their friends. All of this occurs because of the useless, weak-kneed, timid, poor excuse of men out there who are either scared of offending the same dragons that are ruining their nations, or they just don't want to go in for a fight. But I have come here today to say that enough is enough. I'm looking for some warriors out there who refuse to bow down to these oppressive beasts. I believe there's a shift happening all over the world where men are finally waking up from their slumber, and I know there's a lot of men out there who have been quiet but have finally decided to join the battle come hell or high water and stand up to the dragons out there. There's a new generation of dragon slayers coming out of the woodwork, and it's our time as fathers, as sons, as warriors to come together and take the fight to every dragon out there and let them know there's an army of St. George's coming for you. Josh, what the heck happened? I didn't even talk about the first dragon.
I'm sorry, Uncle V. We're all out of time for this video. But look, you need to wrap it up and we'll leave the rest for part 2.
Jiminy Crickets, Josh. All right, fine. So in that case, thank you guys for watching this video, and make sure to join us next week as we'll look into the first dragon that we're coming after. We'll see you next time.